So we're talking about religion and the concept of motivation. Max Weber, this is Max right here, he's a German, that's why we say Weber instead of Weber. Max Weber was a sociologist, and he's the one that came up with the Protestant ethic, and with the concept that capitalism was based on the Protestant ethic. The Protestant ethic has to do with working. Protestants bust their tails to make money. And that's why he talked about the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. The question was, how in the world did this ever come out of Europe? Because if you look at Europe, it's split right in half. Europe was constantly at war between the Catholics and the Protestants. France is Catholic, Spain is Catholic. Where else is Protestant? What's Protestant? Some of the German republics were Protestant. All the southern portion of Germany was Protestant. The northern portion of Germany was no, I got it backwards, didn't I? Southern portion of Germany is Catholic, and the northern part is Lutheran. All the Scandinavian countries are Protestant. England is Protestant. The Low Countries, Belgium and the Netherlands, are all Protestant. So here we've got all this constant warfare going on for like 400 years. And the question is, well, how in the world did capitalism, how did it come out of that whole concept? So Weber actually replaced, Weber's idea about this Protestant ethic actually was replaced Karl Marx. He felt that capitalism was a result of surplus capital, the idea that all of a sudden these people had a lot more money than they needed, and so they were able to put that money to good use by building factories and whatnot. So he felt that it had to do with surplus capital. One of the things that happened in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution started in the 18th century, of course, and in the 19th century, we started, industrialization started for real. And because of that, of course, they changed from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy. He felt that religion was being used to control people. He called it the balm of the masses. The governments were using religion, and they were telling people that they needed to be good boys and girls and go to work and do what they needed to do. And it was religion that was part of the problem, more part of the problem than it was the solution. Weber, however, viewed capitalism as the product of the people deriving meaning from a particular cultural context, and the cultural context in this case was, oh, that's soap. Ugh. Here, let me take a drink. Maybe it's all soap. No, it's okay. Capitalism grew out of the belief system that was rooted in a number of cultural ideas that began emerging in the 16th and 17th century in Western Europe and in North America. The ideas that became foundation for capitalism were the ones that had to do with the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation actually swept in the United States twice. The United States was primarily, the colonies, the English colonies were primarily Protestant. England was Protestant. The people that came over here were primarily Protestant. There were some Catholics, of course. Of all the people that signed the Declaration of Independence, only 2 of them were Catholic. The rest of all those individuals were Protestants. So what became the United States was primarily a Protestant organization. There were 2 huge Protestant movements in the United States. One of them had to do with Methodism, and the other had to do with baptism. So the first was the Methodist Reformation that took place in the in the middle 18th century, and then at the end of the 18th century, the Baptists came over. So if you know anything about Baptist or Methodist, these 2 ideas have been in the United States, and they've been trying to change people for an extended length of time. You can go to different parts of the country and you can find places where everybody's a Methodist. You can go to places in the United States, especially the South, and you can find towns and counties where everybody is Baptist. The area that I grew up in was a Methodist area, and we didn't have any Baptist churches, but we did have lots of Methodist churches. I grew up in a town of about 3,000 people, and we had 3 Methodist churches in town. Well, that's a lot more church than we had people. That didn't make a whole lot of sense. We had a German Methodist church, we had an English Methodist church, and we had the first Methodist church, which was an American Methodist church. So we had one that was based on Wesleyanism, which is English, and we had one that was based on German Methodism. The Evangelical United Brethren is what they call themselves, the EUB Church. Protestants emphasized literacy training more than Catholics did, so that people would be able to read the Bible for themselves. That was the whole idea behind the Protestant church. You didn't need to go see a priest to find out what God wanted you to do. You could read the Bible for yourself. Before that, at this time, and actually until the 1960s, the Catholic liturgy was in Latin. So if you didn't understand Latin, then you didn't understand what was going on in the church. So you had to speak Latin. At this time, of course, the education in Europe was circumspect. There were only select individuals that were being educated, and they weren't being educated to speak Latin. And the reason was because they didn't want everybody to know what was going on. So the Catholic Church was kind of keeping all of this information from the masses. And of course, people who couldn't read would go to church, and then the entire Mass was in Latin. They had no idea what was going on, and then afterwards, the priest would tell them. They would have a select sermon in their native language. But of course, the Protestants at the same time were having sermons. They were having their Bible was written in whatever the native language was. One of the things that happened when they came over here and they started trying to Christianize the Indians, one of the things they tried to do was they tried to write the Bibles in the native language, which was a bit of a trick since you guys didn't have an alphabet. So they had to make one up. Really kind of interesting. So when they went to the different reservations, they tried to create a vocabulary. They tried to create an alphabet to use, and that's primarily what you see when Wilson's writing things down. He's telling you that no, you pronounce this way. That's what he's doing. Your language never actually had an alphabet before, so it's actually it uses English characters, or Roman characters actually. The individualized relation that formed between each person and God has been argued to be central to the blossoming of individualism that emerged during the Reformation and continues to influence much of Western society today. So it had to do with the whole Protestant Reformation. The idea was that before, of course, if you went to Mass with everybody in church and nobody understood what was being said. And so you felt like part of a group, and you were all going to go to heaven together. But the whole idea behind the Protestantism was the idea of individualism. It was the idea that you can read the Bible and you can interpret it for yourself. This is one of the reasons why there are so many different denominations of Protestantism. I can't even stand up here. If I started naming off the number of Protestant religions, I would be up here all day. Just to name a few: the Church of the Nazarene, the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, Seventh-day Adventists. Who else do we have? We have Lutherans. We have Episcopalians. Any number of interesting denominations. And there's probably 15 or 20 different types of Baptists. Southern Baptists, Primitive Baptists, yada, yada, yada. American Baptist Church. The Lutherans have like 6 different synods. Each synod controls their own churches. So there's a Wisconsin synod and an Illinois synod and a Minnesota synod and an American synod. So there's just any number of different groups. And then we get into the Evangelicals, and that gets a little interesting. Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, proposed that each individual had a calling. That is, a unique God-given purpose to fulfill during his or her mortal existence. So we're all looking for our calling. That was the idea behind Protestantism. We're trying to find the one thing that we can do. One thing that we're supposed to do. Why are we supposed to do this? Well, God has given us this idea that we have to follow. So it was a calling. The idea was that we are all God's servants in the world, and that we are each given a specific duty or a job to take care of while we tend the planet. That was the idea behind Protestantism. God gives each individual the unique skills and capabilities needed to fulfill their calling, and it is incumbent upon individuals to discover their calling. So the idea was that's one of the reasons for liberal arts educations. And most of the liberal arts institutions are Protestant institutions. So if we look at all the colleges around the United States, all the Ivy League schools, Harvard and Cornell, Columbia, Princeton, all of these schools are liberal arts schools. If we look at all the small colleges in Ohio and Indiana and Michigan, Kalamazoo, Hope is Dutch Reformed Church. Wabash College, where I went, was a Presbyterian school. Hanover's a Presbyterian school. All these schools are liberal arts schools. And the idea was that you were supposed to find your calling. That was the idea behind the education. So you took classes in a lot of different areas to discover who you're supposed to be. The idea was that the only way to serve God was to find what your calling was and then fulfill that calling. You needed to work for the rest of your life fulfilling your calling. And I don't know why he's got his hand up in the air. I think it's his turn. He's asking a question. I don't know why he's got his hand up in the air. Or why this guy's typing on a computer out in the middle of the ocean. The highest moral duty that individuals were believed to have was to serve God well by working hard at their calling. So if you were supposed to be a farmer, then you worked really hard being a good farmer. That's what you needed to do. Luther was able to imbue daily labor with a spiritual significance that had traditionally been reserved for religious activities such as prayer and ritual. So in the old days, before the Protestant Reformation, one of the things that happened was that they kept telling people that everything needed to be guided through their religion, and the religion had to do with figuring out what the priest wanted you to do. Okay, I don't know if this is making sense. So a lot of times they would read the Bible, and sometimes they would think, well, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? Well, at one point in the 11th, 12th, and 13th century, there were areas in France and in Germany where the individuals thought, they read that portion of the Bible that said, give me, what was it? Give me your little children, come unto me, or something like that. Anyway, they thought that meant that they were supposed to give their children to the church. And that's exactly what they did. They would make a baby, and as soon as the baby was able to survive, they would take the child to the church and give it to the Catholic Church. And then that child would become something. They would become a monk, they would become a nun, they would become a priest, or they would just become a worker. They would become a peasant, and they would work for the church. It was slave labor, in essence, for the church. So if they had the intellect to be a priest or to be a monk or to be a nun, they would do that. But if they didn't, they would become a worker. They would work out in the fields, or they would become a construction person, or they would become a stonemason. And they would work for free for the church because all these people were giving their children to the church. So the church was actually raising the children, as odd as this may sound. So there were whole areas of France and in Germany that the number of children running and playing in the streets was minuscule. And they felt that if they gave their children to the church, then their children would go to heaven. Suffer the little children come unto me. That's what the phrase is. Suffer the little children come unto me. And the idea was that if they gave their children to the church, then those children would get to go to heaven. Now, it was always questionable as to who gets to go to heaven. What do you have to do to go to heaven? Well, we knew that man was condemned from the very beginning just because he was born. And that was a mark of sin, was being born, as odd as that seems. I know, what's going on here? So they would give their children to the church. And of course, if you've ever been around nuns and priests and monks, they do a lot of praying. There's a lot of ritualism to their day. They have vespers in the afternoon where they go in and they pray for an hour before they go and eat the evening meal. You know, all of these rituals and prayers that they have to do in order to keep everybody safe and going in the right direction. This is what they had to do. But of course the Protestant ethic was, well, the thing that I'm supposed to do is work my tail off, and then I get to go to heaven. The harder I work, the more likely I get to go to heaven. If I'm lazy, I don't get to go to heaven. Of course, on Sunday you're not supposed to work, but every other day I had to work my butt off. Because Protestants came to view work as a spiritual task, they wish to avoid debasing it by holding a casual or unprofessional attitude. Protestants felt that people should take their work very seriously, and of course your work was almost like praying as far as the Protestants were concerned. And this is the Protestant work ethic. This has to do with the Protestant work ethic. So you work your butt off, and then you get to go to heaven. The harder you work, the more likely you make it into heaven. It was believed that God would not reward those who were doomed to burn in hell. Are you ready for the reason that rich people get to go to heaven? Are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? So any sign of material success was perceived as evidence that one was one of the elect. So the more money you had, this has to do with greed, the more money you had, the more likely you got to go to heaven. It meant God was smiling on you. God liked you because you had accumulated all this cash. Now this is really kind of interesting. There were a lot of people that voted for Donald Trump because he was a billionaire. How many billions did he have? Well, he said 7. So there were some people that voted for him because they thought he was one of the elect. He wouldn't have been able to accumulate that money unless he was going to heaven. So they saw him as one of the individuals that was selected by God. You think I'm kidding? I've talked to these people. He's going to go to heaven because he's got so much money. Damn, let me see what I've got. $8, I think. That's not going to get me into heaven. Rats. I got some quarters. There you go. Oh, here we go. Joe's going to lend me some money. No? Any accumulated wealth was to be reinvested to further one's efforts and to accumulate even more wealth and evidence of one's status among the elect. So these individuals, these wealthy people, they kind of banded together, and they were all going to go to heaven because they accumulated all this wealth. So the more wealth you accumulated, the more likely you were to go to the right place. Modern capitalism, as Weber viewed it, was thus concerned with the accumulation of wealth for its own sake and not for the sake of material pleasures that it brought. Now the interesting thing is that you're not supposed to have a good time on this cash. You're supposed to reinvest this money. That's the idea behind this whole thing. You're supposed to reinvest it. You're not supposed to have a good time. Oh, wait a minute. It seems like Donald Trump has been having a pretty damn good time, hasn't it? Maybe he's not going to go to heaven. A recent analysis found that Protestants and people living in Protestant societies more generally consider the prospect of being unemployed as more of a blow to their well-being than non-Protestants living in non-Protestant societies do. And this was actually done in Holland. These are two Dutch guys, Van Oom and Maesland. And that was in 2013. In the early 21st century, a study revealed that Protestant nations were far more industrialized than Catholic counterparts, and religious differences accounted for much of that. It had to do with religious differences. In other words, so remember, Protestants will always reinvest their money. And as long as they reinvest their money, then they get to go to heaven. Catholic countries, not so much. If they accumulate wealth, then they do things with their wealth, but they don't reinvest it like Protestants do. So if we're living in a Protestant country, and we've got somebody like Bill Gates, well, Bill Gates, he keeps making piles and piles of cash, but he keeps putting that money back into Microsoft. That's how he makes his cash. Who's that other guy in Omaha? I can never think of what his name is. Anyway, the guy in Omaha. The guy in Omaha just keeps investing his money. He just keeps putting his money back into making more money. Bezos. Bezos is the guy that's in charge of Amazon. Amazon looks like it's going to be the first $1 trillion company. Bezos just keeps putting money back into his company. And he's one of the 3 richest people in the United States. The Waltons. The Waltons are the ones that own Walmart. There's 5 of them. And of the 10 richest people in the United States, those 5 are among the top 10. Bezos is there. What is that guy's name? He's from Omaha. I actually ran into him when I worked in Omaha back in the 90s. I can't think of his name. Anyway, okay. So we can tell the difference between a Catholic country and a Protestant country. The United States is Protestant. It has the highest GDP in the world. England is a Protestant country, has a very high GDP. The Catholic country, Spain. France used to be a Catholic country. It hasn't been one since Napoleon, but Spain is not a very wealthy country. The Eastern Bloc countries are primarily Catholic. Italy is another Catholic country. Not so much money. They don't have so much money. A degree of individualism exists in Protestant countries compared to other countries. The 6 most individualistic countries in the world are largely Protestant, whereas the least individualistic Western societies are largely Catholic. And I just named a bunch of them off. The United States is primarily Protestant. Canada is primarily Protestant. England, France is kind of agnostic. Japan is certainly not Protestant, but it's certainly also not Catholic. All the Latin American countries are Catholic. Mexico is Catholic. Spain is Catholic. So, and most of the Eastern Bloc countries. Countries that dominated the various Asian religions also tend to score low in individualism. China, Japan, Indonesia, India. Pronounced differences in embracing an intrinsic work ethic were observed between Western European Catholics and mainstream Protestants as evident in a measure of work values. So it has to do with who has the work values. This is they redid, who did that? Da Vinci? Was it Da Vinci that painted the Sistine Chapel? Oh, it's Michelangelo that did the Sistine Chapel. I'm sorry. Yeah, and this is a famous picture, of course. He's giving life to man, and here's God giving Protestants a wrench so that they can go to work. As humorous as that is. Or not humorous at all, I guess. Protestant work ethic. The Protestant ethic has been associated with negative attitudes toward laziness and being overweight. One of the problems we have in the United States, of course, has been drug addiction, has been alcohol addiction. For the longest time, of course, the United States was primarily Catholic. And this is one of the reasons why they stopped immigration in the 1920s. Remember, I told you that between 1880 and 1920, 60% of all the people who immigrated to the United States came to the United States. Those individuals, a lot of those individuals were Catholic. A lot of those individuals were Italian, they were Eastern European, and for that reason it was starting to shift. We were starting to get too many Catholics in the United States, or at least people thought so, so they stopped immigration. They almost stopped it completely. They wouldn't let anybody else in. The other group of people that they wouldn't let in were the people from Asia. They wouldn't let the Chinese in. They wouldn't let the Japanese in. And this started in the 1880s. They wouldn't let them in. And they were afraid that they'd be overrun by the yellow peril. Yellow, their skin's yellow. Get it? Yellow peril? Okay. Oh, history, isn't it funny? Anyway, okay, so in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, we've got all these drunks, we've got all these alcoholics, we've got people that are shooting up. And the idea was that these people need to fix themselves because that's the Protestant ethic. The Protestant ethic is that you are lazy and that's why you have a problem. So for the longest time there wasn't anybody trying to help people. They weren't trying to help the addicts. They weren't trying to help the drunks, the individuals that were alcoholics. They weren't trying to help them at all. They said it's a weakness, you're weak. You're a wimp. Just stop. Because a lot of the Protestant religions don't believe in drinking. Methodists don't drink, or at least they're not supposed to. That doesn't mean they all don't. Mormons don't drink. They also don't drink caffeine or coffee. They're not supposed to drink caffeine. They can drink Mountain Dew, as it turns out. I don't know why. They own PepsiCo. The Mormon Church owns PepsiCo. I know this is kind of confusing, isn't it? Write that down. They own PepsiCo, so they can drink Mountain Dew now. But they're not supposed to drink coffee or smoke cigarettes, which is kind of cool, I guess. At least they're not going to die young. Anyway, so their idea is that people that are drug, are excessively overweight, these individuals are lazy. They're lazy, and that's the reason that they have a problem, as confusing and strange as that is. McClellan in 1961 found that Protestant parents expected their children to become self-reliant at an earlier age compared with Catholic parents. Catholic parents want their kids to stay home with them as long as they possibly can. Protestant parents, like I grew up in a Protestant community, I wanted my kids out of the house by the time they're 18. I want them to be individualistic and I want them to have a job. By golly, I want them to work themselves and so that they can make their own money. And that's exactly what happened. Both of my kids left home at 18 and they got jobs and they bought their own damn cars and now they can raise themselves. Is that the way it's supposed to be? By God, my grandson, when he's 18 years old, my daughter's going to turn him out. Going to kick the kid to the curb. He's going to have to go to college to figure this whole thing out. Anyway, that's Protestants. Did you guys know that once upon a time the federal government decided that they were going to Christianize all the Indians? Have you heard this story? They're going to Christianize all the Indians, so they sent missionaries to all the reservations. You already know all that. Okay. None of them were Catholic. None of them were Catholic. They were all Protestants. This is back in the 1870s. They came up with this policy. So they were all Presbyterians and they were Moravians and they were, I don't know, who did they send to this reservation? Or you guys didn't have a reservation? Yes, you did. You had a reservation starting in 1868. So who did they send to your reservation? They didn't send priests. They couldn't have sent. They didn't send the Catholic Church. There's a whole list of them, and nobody knows. That's interesting. I'll figure it out. It's in the congressional record. Christians. Yeah. Well, they're Protestants. Which church? Lutherans? Were they Presbyterians? Episcopalians? Presbyterians? These poor guys. My wife's Presbyterian. Where are they today? Where's the Presbyterian church? Oh, wait a minute. The Blue Church on the way to Chin Lee is Presbyterian. Yeah, that's Presbyterian. Okay. Maybe it's the first one. I don't know. Okay, Presbyterian. Thank you. I was wondering. As confusing as all that is. Okay. McClellan in 1961 investigated the stories written by young boys and found that those written by German Protestants had more evidence of strong achievement motivations than those written by German Catholics. Okay, the reason I showed you this picture is because this is a German town, and there are two churches in this picture. This is one of them, that's the Protestant church, and this is the Catholic church. During World War II, a lot of the towns were destroyed, so they had to rebuild them. And the German government decided that there should be a church in each town, and there should be a, what's the other word for it? Anyway, there should be a Protestant church, which is they call a church, and there should be a Catholic church. So all these tiny little towns in Germany, they have a church on one end of the street. Of one end of the town is the Protestant church, and at the other end of the town is a Catholic church. And it's the federal government that built them. There are two churches that are subsidized by the German government. One is Lutheran, it's a Protestant, and the other is Catholic. So they always build two churches in each town. They built two churches in each town as they were rebuilding Germany. And of course, you know who paid for the rebuilding of Germany? We did. That was the Marshall Plan. We rebuilt Germany. And we always built them two churches, and we always built them a soccer field. As odd as that sounds, I know. All these little tiny towns have soccer fields. So they all have town teams, which is a lot of fun. Ullman and Tannenbaum and Bard in 2011 primed a group of Americans and a group of Canadians with salvation words or neutral words, and then they gave them a task to do. Okay, so they've got these Catholic kids. No, what are they doing? Oh, we're using salvation words. I'm sorry. So these are Canadians and Americans, and we are either giving them salvation words, words that make you want to go to church, I guess. Salvation words, and then just neutral words. The Americans who were primed with salvation words worked harder on the task than those who were primed with neutral words. So it gave them the impetus to try to work harder, because this has to do with the Protestant ethic. Now that's the Americans. Are you ready to find out about the Canadians? Are you sure you want to find out about the Canadians? Okay. The American result indicated that the notion of hard work and salvation are implicitly linked for Americans. This pattern occurred regardless of whether or not the American participants were religious, providing some evidence of Weber's claim that ideas about predestination became secularized and thus part of the American cultural fabric. So in the United States, despite the fact, well, mainly because the United States was almost exclusively Protestant, and you'll have people in Congress, you'll have politicians talking about this. We need to re-Protestantize our country. We need to get rid of all these strange ideas, socialism and Catholicism. We need to get rid of those ideas. But this religion has become part of our politics. The religion has become part of our lives. So we work hard because that is part of the English language. Or is it? Wait a minute, let's go to Canada and find out what happened with those Canadians. The Canadian participants did not work any harder when primed with ideas about salvation, suggesting that an implicit link between salvation and working was not evident. So that's one of the differences between the Canadians and the Americans. Wait a minute. I thought we were the same. Canadians and Americans. What's wrong with Canada? What's wrong with the Canadians? What's wrong with Canada? Or what's right with the United States? We have made religion part of our mindset. Isn't that bizarre? And it wasn't picked up in Canada. Now what the hell's the difference between the Canadians and the Americans? What's right with us and wrong with them, or vice versa? What's right with them and wrong with us? Why didn't the Canadians pick it up as just like we did? Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? This is what happened. In the United States, remember, we have religious freedom. It's like the First Amendment to the Constitution. It has to do with religious freedom. So if you want to go to church, you can go to church. If you don't want to go to church, you don't have to go to church. However, almost all of the small towns in the United States developed as part of a religion. So a religion is part of our fabric. So what happened to the Canadians? Why didn't they do the same thing? Well, they didn't have a constitution. Remember, the Canadians were part of the British Commonwealth. So all of their politics came from England. England has one church. It has a state church. One of the things that the founders of the United States did, they said that we were not going to have any state religions. We weren't going to have a national religion. This is one of the reasons why we keep trying to get religion out of our politics. We keep trying to remove it. In Canada, of course, they have one religion. They have the state religion. It's Anglicanism. They're Anglicans. And in the United States, that same church is the Episcopalian church. As strange, and write this down, Episcopalians and Anglicans are the same. So they've got one religion and it's not part of their politics. And we have multiple religions and it has become part of our politics. As bizarre as all that sounds. So their ideas ain't the same as ours. You start throwing salvation words at us and we start getting all antsy and have to work harder because that's what it means to us, but not to them. That's completely different. As bizarre as that is. Write all this down because you're going to be taking classes from Sarah and she's communion. She ain't the same. She's different. Cohen, Kim, and Hudson in 2014 induced male American Protestant Jews and Catholics to imagine their sisters. Oh, this is a really strange study. This is so weird. Okay, this is in 2014. These guys decided that they were going to take a group of guys that they claimed that they were they were American Protestants, Jews, or Catholics. Okay, and they told them to imagine their sisters in sexual situations. I know, everybody's cringing. Ugh, really? Oh my God. And then they had these guys do sculptures, okay? So what did they do? Well, they made sculptures of their naked sisters. No, I'm just kidding. That's no one else. The Protestants were judged as working harder on their sculptures than the Jews or the Catholics, or the Protestants not primed with depravity about their sisters. Really? Why do you think they did that? Oh, I'm sorry, it's right here. The researchers concluded that it was the depraved thoughts that induced the Protestants to work harder. They felt guilty, so they worked harder. How in the world do you save yourself if something bad has happened and you're a Protestant? Well, you work harder, of course, because that's part of the Protestant ethic. Isn't that bizarre? So they had the Catholics and Jews do the same thing, but they didn't work harder because they can't save themselves. They felt guilty about all of these horrible thoughts they were having about their sisters. So in order to get rid of it, they worked harder. Does all that make sense? Good. I'm glad. The weirdest piece of research that I could ever talk about.
There's another saying that idle hands
is the devil's workshop. Everybody knows it's a devil's workshop. This is too much fun. I want you to think of nasty things about your sister. wish they'd done this with the Canadians, just to see what kind of sculptures they came up with. Anyway. We can see the world as fixed and beyond our control to change, and this is known as the entity theory of the world. Or we can think of the world as flexible and responsive to our efforts to change it. This is known as the incremental theory of the world. So the question is, can we change it or can we not? And if I went around the room, probably most of you would say, well, I don't know what you'd say. What do you think? Can we change the world or not?
Yes.
We can?
This world.
It's a damn big world.
A lot of questions and a lot of answers.
Can we change the world with our own efforts? Or is it fixed? Are we stuck?
We're stuck.
We're stuck. Oh, man,
We can change it.
I'm walking in molasses all of a sudden.
We can't change the world, but we can change ourselves.
So we can change? Okay,
We can.
okay. It's for the truth. How we doing? What do you think? Can we change it or is it stuck? Can't get an answer. Can we change it or is it stuck? The world.
Maybe just how we view
Sure it is, but do you view it that we can change it, or do you view it that it's stuck and we don't have a choice?
it's possible. It's not gonna be
So
easy.
you think we can change it?
It's
Okay.
not gonna be easy, but it's possible.
What do you think, Sharon? Can we change it? You think so? Okay, good. Sharon,
I can do it myself.
can we change it?
Yes.
We can. Yes. Oh, I Tyrone.
Say so.
You don't count. Tyrone. We can, okay. Well, go ahead, Joe. What do you think?
No, you said I don't count, so I'll belong in this chain.
I just changed him. Okay.
Now you sound like a piece of truth.
So most of us think we can change the world. That's a very strong Protestant idea, that we can change things by working harder. Remember, we got these evil thoughts about our sisters in our brains. And if we work harder, we can change, yeah. Now maybe that idea will go away. We don't feel nearly as guilty as we did before. Rothbaum, Wise, and Snyder in 1982 proposed that there are two ways to gain control of your life. People achieve as a sense of primary control by striving to shape existing realities to fit their perceptions, goals, or wishes. Primary control also goes into the related name internal locus of control, influence, and agency. So the idea is we have internal locus of control, and we think that we can control the world. Not control the world, but control ourselves. And of course, we got some philosophical ideas. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. We also had people that didn't think that we could change anything at all. But that was, we have primary control. People achieve a sense of secondary control. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So, if we believe that we can control the world, why is it that everything repeats itself? I mean, like predictions are made, and those predictions actually happen. Like how the world, like for an example, I was watching a video the other day, and they made a prediction that the years in 2000 are going to be a change in the world to where things are going to happen. Maybe even the world's going to end. But those predictions, they're always made, and it seems like there's World War I that took place,
Right.
and then World War II. These were already predicted by people, and it seems like it repeats itself. So when the world changes, when things change in the world, it repeats itself. There's a change.
So everything's cyclical.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a pattern.
Sure.
So does it really change? Is what I'm asking. Does it really change?
I would say so. We're much better at killing people than we used to be. So that's a change.
But that's in the past. we're killing more people in the past.
We wanted to kill a lot of people today. I think we do a really good job.
I think we could just kill everybody.
We could. Everything, so in essence, everything is cyclical, even though it's changing, we keep repeating the same mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is it actually changing?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess.
That's my question. I don't know.
I think so. I mean, things have changed. We eat better. Now we're eating plastic things, like Twinkies, right?
We eat
used
better,
to
but we're bigger.
We are, we're fat.
And we have a disease that's called diabetes.
Yeah,
Obesity.
and it's killing us.
So we actually believe that we eat better, but are we really eating better?
Even though we're killing ourselves?
And then we also believe that there's progress, but there's actually global warming. So
There is.
Is there change?
There's a change for you. Global warming.
Yeah, that's like the biggest change.
Yeah, it's huge. I know. What else?
Humans.
Yeah, there's so many humans around. So many more. And we're predicting that by 2030, we're gonna have 8 billion people in the world. We have 7 billion now. Wait a minute, 7 billion, that's the amount of money that Donald Trump has. He's got $1 for every human on earth. That's an excellent question. And it's an interesting question. I would say it has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at Rome, if we look at the Trojan Wars, we look at the types of wars that we've had, they have gone from local wars to world wars. That in itself is a change. Now everybody's mad. Once upon a time, armies just killed other armies. They didn't kill civilians. Now it's universal. And that happened in the, well, actually it happened after they came to the Americas. They started declaring war on whole populations of people. Once upon a time, in the United States, or in the Americas, the French king thought he controlled his entire, the entire area that he was supposedly in charge of. And people came to him and they said, the Fox Indians, they keep attacking us. And they keep stealing our women, and they keep they keep burning our crops. And he said, and he told them, he sent an envoy to the Fox and he said, stop doing this. And they said, you have no control over us. And he said, I am your sovereign. And they said, no. And they kept doing it. So guess what the French king did? He decided he was going to exterminate all the Fox Indians, the Meskwaki. The Meskwaki live in Iowa today. They live in Tama in Iowa. Obviously, he was unsuccessful in killing them all. But he chased them out of Canada, and he chased them into the Great Plains. And he gave people bounties on what scalps they could bring in. He's the first one to decide he wanted to scalp all the Fox Indians. He wanted to kill them all. He wanted to kill all the women, he wanted to kill all the children, he wanted to kill all the men, of course, but he was unsuccessful.
So that part of it, that's the part I'm kind of questioning, like, that cycle repeats itself. The majority group, the most powerful power, it repeats itself. Okay, the killing takes place because of power and greed.
Right.
So World War I, II, III. Is III coming? I mean, the majority group always defeats the minority group. So it repeats itself.
It might defeat the minority group, but remember Hitler tried to exterminate all the Jews, and he was unsuccessful. Louis XIV tried to exterminate all the Fox Indians, and he was unsuccessful.
But that extermination just repeats. So when you talk about change, does it have to start with the majority group for change, or can the minority group change?
Well, I guess we're gonna find out in the next election, because the Democrats are gonna try to take over Congress. We'll see if it works. Right now, the Republicans control everything in politics. They control the presidency, they control Congress, and they control the Supreme Court. My goodness, all the conservatives on the Supreme Court now, since last Saturday. It'll be interesting to watch. I keep saying that, don't I? It's going to be interesting to watch, but we have to wait until November. The other thing I want to tell you is, the answer is, I see that it is different, and has been change. The other thing that I need to tell you is everybody needs to vote. I don't care who you vote for, but vote. Everybody needs to vote. And the reason you need to vote is because, are you ready for this? The governor of your state, the people in your state don't want you to vote. They don't want you to have political power. But if you vote, no matter how you vote, as long as you vote, they're going to have to do what you want them to do. They're going to have to ask you what you want, and they'll start giving you what you want. If you don't vote, they can ignore you and pretend you don't exist. This happened up in Montana, and they got the vote out on the reservations. There's 7 of them up there. And they got the vote out, and they were able to change the governor from one party to the other. They were able to elect a Democratic senator in place of a Republican senator that was the worst senator you can possibly imagine. And now both parties have to listen to the American Indians up there. They have to. And if you guys did the same thing, if you vote, if you just ignore it, they can ignore you. But you need to be a political entity. You need to show them that they need to listen to you. And if you want something done, that's what happened up in Alaska. Murkowski's a Republican. She didn't know how to vote for whether she was going to vote for Kavanaugh or not. And the Eskimo said Kavanaugh doesn't like indigenous peoples. And they said, if you don't vote against him, then we're not going to vote for you next time. And she voted against him. Even though she was right there on the line, she voted against him. My point is that you guys, if you want them to ignore you, then don't vote. But if you want to have political power, or at least get them to listen to what you have to say, the only way to do that is to vote, to show them that you are a political entity. So if you're not signed up to vote, write for an absentee ballot. It doesn't really matter how you vote. You just need to do it. They need to see who you are. They need to know who you are.
Plus you get a sticker.
I'm sorry?
Plus you get a sticker.
Yeah, you get that really cute I voted sticker.
I think when you talk about control, it comes back to like, because we're taking the colonization, decolonization class.
Mhm.
It comes back to you as an individual. That's why I said I can change, but I don't think I can change the world. Some people don't want to change. It's like working with yourself and then starting with your families and your community, kind of making that movement, starting from you as a person.
Right.
So we're all colonized. We're the way we think, the way we do. So they pretty much won that battle, but it's up to us to...
Well, the other question is, what would you be like if you weren't colonized?
Probably still be running around in books.
I mean, would you? Well,
Just kidding.
but we're talking about control, right? So you're assuming that
We're
you're being controlled.
yeah, but like I said, it's up to you as an individual
Right.
first.
And that's where it starts. It has to start with the first person.
Yeah, because anything you do, I think, like anything in your life, if you want change, it has to be you that changes first.
Right.
But
Right.
Then,
If you ignored it, it'll never change.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's going on in Washington right now. The mob. They are demonstrating in front of the Supreme Court. They're so pissed off. Women are pissed off, and the reason they're pissed off is because obviously they didn't listen to them when they complained about sexual abuse or sexual assault and rape. And now they're really upset. And as somebody who wants to see change, I think it's a real positive thing, but it needs to continue until November. People need to stay pissed off until November. So they vote the way that they need to vote, or whatever, for change. We need to vote for change, not same.
It's like being in a domestic violence relationship. That controlling environment and that domestic violence to where you're a victim and you're always a victim. And you get abused and abused and abused. You still go back. So how do you overcome that control? How do you overcome that to make that change in this relationship? Are you always going to be a victim? And she was saying that it comes back to you as an individual.
You got to make the
And
change.
it's a lot of willpower.
Yeah.
It's yourself.
Well, maybe we're all being victimized by
Trump.
by the type of politics that people are spewing now.
Yeah.
If you watch the commercials on television, these are being paid for by political parties. They're all attack ads. They're complaining about, well, I only see New Mexico television. I don't see Arizona television. So I have no idea what's going on in this state. But I do see the attack ads against the two gubernatorial candidates, Xochitl Small, I can't remember, Torres. Xochitl, anyway, she's Hispanic. It's kind of interesting. She's got an advertisement where she's hunting with a shotgun. She never fires the shotgun, but she's still carrying the shotgun. So she's trying to show people Second Amendment rights and whatnot. Yeah, I know, it's really kind of interesting. Change can only come from within. How about that? Ooh, wait a minute, that sounds like an introduction to counseling, doesn't it? Only that person can change themselves. People achieve a sense of secondary control when they attempt to align themselves with existing realities, leaving the realities unchanged but exerting control over the psychological impact of these realities. Secondary control, also is known as adjustment, is related to the construct of external locus of control. Your desires and goals adjust themselves to what your environment is most likely to provide. So even if you're somebody from up north, somebody who's used to the snow, you would have to adjust when you came down to the hot desert, by changing your clothes, for one thing. So the environment is controlling you. What else? Water, flash floods. Your environment has changed, so you have to change with the environment. You have to adapt. You have to adjust yourself. It's because the environment, you have to live within that environment, within that reality. So if you went up north, as Aaron Lee did, he's up at Salish Kootenai College now. It's cold up in the mountains, I'll tell you, it's cold up there. So he came from here and he went up there, and now he's going to have to buy a jacket that is nice and warm, because he's up in Salish Kootenai country now. So he's going to have to buy a jacket, a down jacket. I'm not just talking about a coat. He's going to have to buy one with feathers in it in order to keep himself warm. When he comes down here, he can throw the coat away, he can put it in its closet. It doesn't really make any difference. But when he's up there, he's going to have to carry that damn coat around. They've already had snow up there. Well, we had snow today, didn't we? Well, that was sleet, that wasn't snow. Yeah, they've already had snow. Last year they got snowed in. I can't wait to hear the stories coming out of Aaron Lee when he comes back. Your desires and goals adjust, of course, due to the environment. Rothbaum and Blackburn in 1984 see many socializing experiences in Japan that lead Japanese to be more comfortable with engaging in secondary control strategies. They adjust themselves to their environment. So if you see somebody on a train, especially the subway in Tokyo, the subway in Tokyo is very, 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 very crowded. More crowded than you can possibly imagine. If you've ever seen pictures of pushers, these are individuals that will push a group of individuals onto the subway. You need to stand right next to you. You're going to have people touching you. You really don't have a choice. So if you've ever been to an airport in the United States, people sit down and waiting for their airplane, and they'll put their gym bag, they'll put their suitcase right in a chair right beside them to keep people from sitting down beside them. They'll put one on the other side. So here they are isolated. That ain't going to happen in Japan. In Japan, somebody's going to come along, we're going to pick that thing up and put it on the floor and sit down. That's what happens in Japan. Because they don't have enough room to allow you to put your luggage someplace. You better not be in their way, because they will move it. That's the way it works in Japan. Japanese infants spend much more time in contact with their mothers, and thus learn to adjust themselves to what their mothers are doing. So they are far better behaved than American children, because we try to teach our children autonomy. They don't try to teach their children autonomy. They try to teach their children to adjust themselves to the environment. And I have no idea what time it is. 35? Okay. Japanese workers change jobs far less frequently than Western counterparts, and it is not uncommon for workers to be promised lifetime employment. Wouldn't that be great? I can't even sign a 2-year contract. Well, I did. I signed a 2-year contract. So what's the probability I'm going to be able to stay here for the rest of my life? But if I were in Japan, I would sign a lifetime contract, potentially. A system ensuring that employees learn to adjust themselves to whatever demands the company places on them, and of course they will. They will adjust to whatever is happening in the company. These guys are not praying. They're not praying. They're all looking down, and the reason they're looking down is because they are getting instructions from their boss. And they're not making eye contact, because that would be insulting to their boss. So they're looking down, and they're getting instructions from the foreman. In a Japanese and American study where workers were asked to recount when they had been helped and when they had helped others, the Americans were better able to recall when they had influenced other individuals. This is a study from 2002. The Japanese recalled far more times when they were assisted than when they helped someone else. So as Americans, we forget when we are being helped. We forget we remember when we are helping other people. The Japanese are more likely to remember somebody that helped them. Okay, so who's going to be more appreciative, the Japanese or Americans? Probably the Japanese are going to be appreciative. Oh, remember 3 years ago when you picked up my pencil after I dropped it? No. But Americans, of course, we would forget that. It wouldn't be important to us. But as far as the Japanese are concerned, this is what a Japanese subway looks like. You can see how people are standing there. How they're pretending they're not touching each other. I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. Look at this guy. He's standing right beside this lady. Her hand is, well, we won't talk about how close to his crotch her hand is. But as you can see, they're trying to maintain their own area and not have any area to maintain. As interesting and confusing as that is. So that's why the Japanese have to live up here. They don't live in their space, they live up here. Because all these people are right next to each other. I mean, they could be kissing each other if they wanted to. They're that close. But of course, They're living in their minds, not in the position in the subway, because you're right up against somebody. Not just somebody, he's also touching probably 3 other people behind him, and he's trying to maintain himself. Look at him, his foot is right next to hers. His foot's right next to her foot as well. Weird, isn't it? In the United States, would we put up with something like this? Something this crowded? No. I'd wait for the next train. In Japan, you'll be waiting all night long. You'll never get on a train. There is a little emphasis on making choices in life to people from India. Making choices seems to be more difficult for Indians than for Americans. Indians take significantly more time to make choices than do Americans. We make choices all the time. When we go to the store, we have to decide what kind of bread we want. Do we want brown bread? Do we want white bread? Do we want nut bread? Do we want sandwich bread? Do we want French bread? Do we want Italian bread? We have to make choices constantly. What kind of peanut butter do you want? Do you want chunky? Do you want smooth? Does anybody eat peanut butter? What?
Smooth, crunchy.
Crunchy? Crunchy?
Smooth.
My wife eats crunchy peanut butter, okay. I don't eat peanut butter. She does. On apples. Yeah, what's that all about?
It's good.
Why did you put
Peanut butter.
on apples? Indians don't respond as negatively when they are deprived of the opportunity to choose when compared with Americans. Indians and people from numerous other non-Western cultures also indicate that they have less free choices in their lives compared to North Americans. If you go to a store in India, it has one type of rice. It has one type of flour. It has one type of tomato sauce. It's kind of like going to the gas station. You have one choice as far as eggs are concerned. Are they large? They're not broken, so I guess they're good. One type of cheese. Okay. So it's kind of like going to the gas station. Choices do not appear to play as large a part in their lives as with North Americans, of course. And since they have no choices, they don't know how to make choices. And we make choices constantly. You probably had to decide what kind of car you wanted. Potentially, I hope you had a choice as to what color your car was. Did you? What color is your car?
Silver.
Silver?
I still got the bike.
What color?
Huh?
What color is your bike?
That's green, like the
It's
car.
What color is your car? Gray. I got a silver and I got a dark gray. This is getting good. A tan? Hot pink?
White.
I'm trying to remember the hot pink car out of the drive, out of the parking lot. Black? Black, silver, dark gray, beige, or I'm sorry, tan, and white. Okay.
One brown and the other is white.
So when you say brown, what, dark brown?
Yeah, it's like a dark.
Dark brown, and dark brown and gray, okay.
Sage brown.
Good for you. Bicycle? Do you have a bicycle? No. You don't have a vehicle either? Tan? We have 2 tan cars. This is kind of interesting. Okay. But did you choose the color, or did you just take whatever the hell was out there?
Just wanted what was there.
It was what was there? It was the only one on the lot?
You know, because they said, if you want that color, you're gonna have to wait again. And I just wanted that new vehicle.
I'm mad at my wife. I'm mad at my wife because my wife is very specific about her vehicles. She bought a Honda Accord, but instead of buying the color of car she wanted, she took what was on the lot. And now she hates her car because she doesn't like the color. And it makes me angry because she let Honda decide what color car she was going to get. Instead of making her own choice, she took whatever they had on the lot. How long would she have had to wait? How long would you have had to have waited for a car?
For a vehicle that, in my color?
Yeah.
I preferred the blue, but they said it would take about 2 to 3 weeks before they could get a vehicle of that color. Okay.
Really? You've got Albuquerque.
I wasn't ready to drive up.
No. You've got Albuquerque to the east of you. You've got Phoenix to the south of you. there's probably 1 million of your car, of the type of car that you have in Phoenix and in Albuquerque, and it's gonna take them 2 to 3 weeks to get you a car? I don't believe that.
If they just wanted me to take what was there.
Exactly. I hope you got a discount for taking.
Yeah, like $10 off.
There you go. That's a hamburger. Oh, man. This is a, so I'm mad at my wife. Now she hates her car. It's blue. Not that you wanted a blue car, but it's a dark blue car. In order for her to figure out which car is hers, she had to put an American flag on her car, because there's so many cars that look exactly like hers.
Isn't it amazing how when you buy a vehicle, you don't recognize that vehicle until you have that vehicle?
Exactly. And now all of a sudden, every car that goes past you, go, oh, look. My twin just went by. The more important the action, the more likely Americans were to identify it as a personal choice. Whereas for Indians, we're talking about Asian Indians, of course, the more important the action, the less likely they were to view it as a personal choice. They don't want to make decisions. We do want to make decisions, because then we feel like we're individuals. You're probably a little upset that they made you take a white car. You wanted that damn blue one. Yeah, okay. Exactly. They could have gotten you one in a couple days. I'm guessing. Lazy people. When Americans were given an opportunity to choose something, they almost always select the option they prefer. All my cars are red. Both of my cars are red. My wife, her favorite color is red. So why in the world did she ever pick a blue car? She didn't. Honda did. The link between preferences and choices isn't as tight among Indians. They are less likely to choose their favorite option. They'll take whatever is there. I have a friend from Bangladesh, or I have a student, ex-student from Bangladesh. He just got a new car. It's a Nissan Sentra. I think it's a Sentra. And I asked him what color it was, and he said, oh, Dr. Bruce, I'm not exactly sure what color it is. I said, why not? He said, well, that wasn't important to me. So he just got whatever was available, and he didn't even notice what color it is. Isn't that... If an American wouldn't do that, but he's from Bangladesh. All the cars are the same color in Bangladesh. The other thing that you need to know... How much time do I have? In Japan, there's only 2 colors of car. Isn't that odd? In the United States, the Japanese, they'll send us all these cars that are orange and blue and green. In Japan, there's only 2 colors of car. It's either black or white. 70% of all the cars in Japan are black. Are white. 20% of all the cars in Japan are black. So 10% are some other color. And they're always a shade of either black or white. It's a dark gray, or it's a off-white color. But 70% of all their cars are the same color. It's so bizarre driving down the street in Japan. All the cars are white. Every once in a while you'll see a black car come by, but they're almost all white. So when you see these movies and they've got these cars painted all these fabulous colors, it's not right. Not the way it happens in Japan. They're all almost the same color. 90% of all their cars are just 2 different colors. Do we have time to learn helplessness? Yeah, one more slide. In learned helplessness, an individual feels that he or she is unable to control or avoid unpleasant events, and the person will suffer from stress and potentially depression. Learned helplessness. This is the lady that's being abused. I think it was Travis that was talking about an abused wife and the fact that she doesn't think that she can leave. That's learned helplessness. She doesn't think she can leave. A study by Oettingen and Seligman in 1990 found that East Berliners showed more signs of learned helplessness than the people on the other side of the wall in West Berlin. And of course, you guys have never been to Berlin. Now the walls come down and you are going, what are they talking about the wall? The wall they're talking about was the wall between the East and the West, East Germany and West Germany. East Germany was being controlled by the Russians. West Germany was free. So when I was in Germany, back between 1979 and 1982, we lived in West Germany because we're the United States. So we were in West Germany, and we were confronting the East Germans, their army. We were also confronting the Russian tanks. They had tanks all over the place. Well, we went to Berlin. And in East Germany, it was a lot cleaner. But these people had no choices whatsoever. A good movie to watch. This is really kind of strange because I'm going to tell you to watch a movie that comes from a cartoon. Watch Atomic Blonde if you've ever seen. Has anybody seen the movie Atomic Blonde? That is so real. It looks like it really did when I was there. We went through the wall at Checkpoint Charlie, and my kids and I, and we went to East Germany. It's clean. But the people are so unhappy. They were so grouchy. It was really kind of fun. Funny and not funny, I guess, because it's learned helplessness. They had no control over their lives whatsoever. It was the most bizarre thing you've ever seen. So this was a country that was completely under the control of the Russians, and it was just really too bizarre. So when they did their study, one of the things they discovered was East Germans were suffering from learned helplessness. They knew that there was no way to escape. They talked about people trying to jump the fence. You couldn't do that. They'd shoot you. They'd kill you. They wouldn't let you go. So people tried to escape, and of course, they were gunned down on their way across the wall. And that's one of the reasons why the wall was so tall. Anyway, we'll pick this up right here with learned helplessness, and we'll see if Americans have learned helplessness or just East Germans, the funny East Germans. Now they're free, so don't feel bad. Okay, they're okay. Germans are free.